Did China and European entities play a role in helping Iran track US military movements during the conflict? Has Washington now revealed critical details on how Iran was able to monitor and strike American positions with precision? Were Chinese and European satellite firms involved in enabling Iran to stay one step ahead of US forces on the battlefield? And do these revelations now expose how American operations may have been compromised during the conflict? Further details have emerged regarding China's alleged satellite involvement in Iran's operations against US forces. Reports indicate that a Chinese satellite firm, Vision, may have played a significant role in tracking US military movements in the region. These allegations were raised by a US Select Committee on China as part of its recent findings. The panel also pointed to the involvement of a European satellite company in supporting these activities. Airbus Space has been accused of monitoring US troop movements for extended periods even before the conflict escalated. According to the committee, satellite imagery collected by the European firm was later shared with Vision. Documents outlining these claims and their implications were made public on April 15. The US Select Committee on China said, and I quote, "These documented facts present a troubling scenario. 1. A Chinese firm with undisclosed satellite sourcing published precise, annotated imagery of US military assets at a specific base. 2. That imagery identified the exact aircraft types that were subsequently destroyed in a precise Iranian strike. 3. A technical analysis suggests Airbus space satellites were the most plausible sources for that imagery." End quote. The chairman of the US Select Committee on China has formally raised these concerns with senior defense leadership. John Muoliner addressed a communication to U.S. War Secretary Pete Hegseth regarding the activities of the satellite firms. The chairman of the U.S. panel on China said, and I quote, "While commercial satellite imagery may serve public interest purposes in some cases, unconstrained imagery provision exposing U.S. forces to heightened risk crosses a dangerous threshold. Near real-time publication of precise, annotated imagery identifying the exact type, number, and location of specific high-value military assets at an active forward operating base, while those assets are actively engaged in combat operations, is targeting data for enemy forces." The Select Committee's independent analysis tracked the positions and flight paths of 4 Airbus satellites over the area of interest across a 48-hour window. For each moment in that window, 3 conditions had to be met for collection to be considered feasible. 1. The satellite had to be in the right position to see the area. 2. Its camera had to be capable of pointing in the right direction. And 3. There had to be enough daylight to take an optical photograph. End quote. The US panel has also alleged that Airbus Space's imagery may have compromised the security of American forces. Airbus Space satellites reportedly captured detailed imagery tracking movements of US troops in the region. These satellite systems were also positioned in advance to enable surveillance even before the conflict began. The collected imagery was then allegedly shared with the Chinese firm Vision for further analysis and interpretation. Reports also indicate that Airbus Space maintains existing business links connecting it with Vision. Vision has been accused of using satellite data to map US troop positions in the region. Reports suggest that these monitoring activities began even before the escalation of hostilities. The US panel further alleged that such intelligence may have contributed to targeting decisions involving American assets. It also stated that imagery of US aircraft at Prince Sultan Air Base had been published by the firm. The US panel said, and I quote, "Vision published the photo depicted above of American aircraft positioned at Prince Sultan Air Base, which was analyzed using modeling and simulation techniques to determine the position of the satellite that took the image. The analysis tracked the positions and flight paths of 4 Airbus satellites over the area of interest across a 48-hour window. For each moment in that window, 3 conditions had to be met for collection to be considered feasible. 1. The satellite had to be in the right position to see the area. 2. Its camera had to be capable of pointing in the right direction, and 3. There had to be enough daylight to take an optical photograph. Moments that passed all 3 tests were flagged as plausible collection opportunities. The results identified 2 daily windows, each roughly 10 hours long, during which at least one of the 4 Airbus commercial satellites met all criteria, and at certain moments, as many as 3 could simultaneously have captured the image of Prince Sultan Air Base. End quote. Iran reportedly used Chinese satellite support to help locate U.S. targets during the war, adding a major new dimension to concerns over Beijing's indirect role in the conflict. According to reports, China gave Iran a capability that could help it target U.S. military bases across the Middle East with far greater precision than before. The Financial Times was cited as the source of the revelation in later reporting, with the Times of Israel highlighting the claim on April 15 as the issue drew wider international attention. Iran had earlier claimed that its strikes on American bases across the Gulf were precise, and the new reporting is now being used to explain how Tehran may have achieved that level of targeting accuracy. Even during the 2-week ceasefire, China has faced accusations of continuing to support Iran militarily, including reports that it may be preparing to send new air defense aid. Meanwhile, a China-linked ship was also reported to have passed through the Strait of Hormuz despite Trump's blockade, adding to the impression that Beijing is testing Washington on multiple fronts at once. The U.S. on April 13 officially launched a comprehensive naval blockade aimed specifically at stopping ships from entering or exiting key Iranian ports along the Persian Gulf. However, fresh reports indicated that multiple commercial and cargo ships successfully transited the Strait of Hormuz despite the heavily publicized U.S. blockade efforts. An Iran-linked oil tanker along with several Chinese ships were reportedly able to transit freely amid the ongoing blockade, underscoring potential cracks in the American enforcement. A Chinese tanker sanctioned by the United States sailed through the Strait of Hormuz on April 14, marking a striking development amid the new maritime standoff in the Gulf. The vessel passed through Hormuz despite the U.S.-imposed blockade, according to ship tracking data that showed it successfully made the transit out of the Gulf. Reuters made the claim about the vessel Rich Starry, citing tracking data from LSEG, Marine Traffic, and PLR to document the ship's movement through the strategic waterway. According to the same data, the Rich Starry would be the first ship to make it through the strait and exit the Gulf since the blockade began. Notably, both the tanker and its owner, Shanghai Xianrun Shipping Company, Limited, are under U.S. sanctions, making the passage especially politically sensitive. Reuters reported that sanctions on the Chinese-linked company were imposed because of its dealings with Iran, placing the vessel in the wider network of trade restrictions tied to Tehran. The Rich Starry is a medium-range tanker carrying about 250,000 barrels of methanol, according to the shipping data cited in the reports. The vessel loaded that cargo at its last port of call in Hamria in the United Arab Emirates, adding another regional link to the ship's voyage. Reuters also reported that the Chinese-owned tanker has a Chinese crew on board, based on the available vessel data. An Iranian embassy statement described the Rich Starry as a Malawi-flagged tanker, adding another detail to the growing attention around the ship's transit. Iranian embassy in Ghana wrote on X, and I quote, "Breaking, Rich Starry, a Chinese oil tanker sanctioned for shipping Iranian oil, flying the flag of Malawi, a country with no coastline, just sailed through America's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz." The Navy, with its many big beautiful ships, issued repeated warnings. Reportedly, the tanker's captain upgraded to premium to skip the ads. Edit. We're being told the blockade only applies to countries the US isn't afraid of. That list used to be long. It now fits on Trump's McDonald's receipt, delivered by DoorDash. Unquote. After the announcement of a US naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, China indicated that it aligns with Iran's position on the issue. Beijing also called on President Donald Trump to remain composed and exercise restraint following the collapse of recent talks with Iran.